Hi, I'm Christine. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm here with Romance Recs by Black authors. So February is Black History Month, and I know that Hannah Blackwell, she has a YouTube channel. I will link it below. She asked a bunch of us on BookTube if we wanted to collaborate and have all of our videos kind of go out within the month of February just to uplift and celebrate Black authors. So I thought this was the perfect time to share a bunch of my favorites, and I'm so excited to do this. I feel like it's so important to read diversely all throughout the year. I think we all know this, but it's just so important to do. And so I just wanted to celebrate a bunch of Black authors today that I know write amazing romances. I just think representation is so important in the books we read and the media we consume. And just being able to go into a bookstore and see yourself represented on the bookshelves, on the book covers. I think it's so important for book covers, especially for anybody to be able to walk into a bookstore and see themselves in a book, in a story, on the shelf, in an author, just any of those things. So I thought this would just be a perfect time to celebrate Black authors and uplift a bunch of their books, because if you haven't picked up these books, just please do. I love these books to pieces. So let's get into it. Of course, as always, if you want to see more of my thoughts or full reviews on any of the books I talk about, I do review every book I read on Goodreads. It's always linked in the description of my videos. And with all of that out of the way, let's get into it. I'm going to keep it kind of quick because I have a ton of authors to get through, and so I'm so excited. If you have any recommendations for Black authors writing romance as well, definitely drop them in the comments because I would love to pick up their books as well. So yeah, let's get into it because I have so many to share today. All right, so first up, we're going to jump into Alyssa Cole. So I have a ton of books from her to recommend. I love that she writes so many different genres. She writes thrillers as well, which I have enjoyed as well, but today we're just going to focus on the romances. So like I said, I'm going to keep it kind of quick. So first up is her Reluctant Royals series. I love this series to pieces. Duke by Default is one of my favorites in the series. I think this is book 2. I read these ones years ago. The audiobooks in particular are fantastic. The first book in the series, I'll put it up here. I think it's A Princess in Theory. Loved that one so much. This whole series, we're basically following these kind of like, as the series suggests, kind of these reluctant royals in modern contemporary times. And so A Princess in Theory, the first book in the series, is where the heroine realizes that she's a real life princess, didn't know that her whole life. So she ends up meeting the hero who comes to kind of figure out who she is in person without letting her know. And so he poses as a college student to get to know her because I think they are betrothed or something as well. And so it kind of goes from there. Love this series. Like I said, Duke by Default is my favorite. So the heroine in here, she is a socialite and she's a bit of a hot mess. So she decides to go to Scotland and apprentice with this sword maker. And it kind of goes from there. He's giving very much like a silver-haired fox vibes. Like I said, this whole series is fantastic. I think there's the 3 main books. There's also a bunch of novellas in this series. I know in one she has a wheelchair user, and then in another it's like a sapphic romance. So I love seeing all the rep that this author writes in her books as well. She has another like spin-off kind of royals series, which is the Runaway Royals series. I know the second book in the series, which is How to Find a Princess, is a sapphic romance. I just love this author's books to pieces, but the Reluctant Royals series is definitely my favorite from her for her contemporaries. She also has The AI Who Loved Me, which is one of my favorites. The audiobook for this in particular is fantastic. And when I recently saw this author at a book signing last year, I had to get the physical copy. I love that she signed them all. And so it was just such a fun one. Like I said, the audio in particular is so much fun. So this is a like contemporary with like a sci-fi kind of futuristic twist. So in this, the heroine ends up meeting the hero, who is actually her kind of neighbor's nephew, or what she assumes is her neighbor's nephew. And so she starts to kind of hang out with him after some things happen in their apartment building, and she realizes that he is an AI, and it kind of goes from there. I love this one. Love like the whole sci-fi twist to it. Highly recommend. Like I said, it's so cute, but also the audiobook is fantastic. So yeah, definitely recommend this one. So she also has historical romances, which you know I love some historical romances around here. So this is another series that I loved. I think it's just called the Extraordinary Union series, but I could be wrong. So this is the first book in the series, which is An Extraordinary Union. Then we have book 2, which is A Hope Divided. And then book 3 is An Unconditional Freedom. So all of these books, they are historical romances. They take place during the Civil War. So we have Underground Railroad, we have Spies. This series is just so good, and I love the history and the romances and the connection with characters that you get in this series. Highly recommend. It's such a good series. I think they've recently been recovered. These are the originals. Highly recommend it. They're just so good. And so next up is Stacy Reid. I love her historical romances so much. So here's just 3 of my favorites from this author. I've read majority of her backlist. First up is My Darling Duke. This one is so good. I love this book to pieces. So in this one, the heroine is a wallflower, but her family is on the brink of a financial ruin. And so she knows that to help out her younger sisters, she needs to kind of step it up and pretend to be betrothed to somebody. And so she decides to kind of claim that this Duke, who hasn't been seen in years in society, that he is her betrothed, that they're engaged. And so she starts telling everybody that and kind of just runs with it. So at the same time, we know that she's never met this man in real life, but he is the hero of the story. He is a wheelchair user, and you see how he has kind of taken himself away from society and just kind of lives isolated. And so he starts hearing these kind of rumors of somebody saying that they are betrothed to him. So instead of being like angered or annoyed with the whole situation, situation, he's like intrigued. And so he's like, I want to know more. And so he decides to show up at his house and figure out who this woman is who is claiming to be his betrothed. And it goes from there. Such a good one. This is a great place to start for historical romance readers as well. Love this book. This whole series is so good. Then another one for Stacy Reid. This is one of my favorites. This is Accidentally Compromising the Duke. So these are, she has like traditionally and indie published books, and this is one of her indie published ones. This is the first book in her Wedded by Scandal series. I love this one. Basically in here, another one where the heroine's trying to get out of this like betrothal arranged situation. And so the heroine in here decides she needs a scandal to get out of that. So she decides to sneak in to somebody's room and she's going to like pretend to be compromised. Friends find her, everybody at the house party finds out, and that she can get out of her other situation. But instead she ends up in the bed of the hero, who is a duke, and he has a very terrible reputation. And so he decides to run with it. And he's like, yeah, actually we are engaged. And it kind of goes from there. I love this one. He's a single dad. Like I said, he has a reputation around town with things that maybe happened with his previous wife. Everybody's afraid of him, and the heroine is not. And so I really enjoyed this one. Marriage of Convenience, so good. Next up is 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. This one I love. This was one of my favorites a couple years ago when I read it. So this is a contemporary romance where in here the hero and the heroine, it's a bit of a second chance. So they had a moment years ago in their past when they were teenagers, and now it's years later. I think like 15 years later. The heroine is now a single mom and she is an erotica writer, and the hero is an award-winning novelist as well. And so they end up kind of accidentally meeting up in New York at a literary event, and it kind of goes from there. All of these old past traumas and past feelings, this like little weekend they had in the past together kind of gets brought up, and it kind of goes from there. This one is so good. Love the audiobook for this one in particular. Highly recommend. Totally worth the hype. Loved this one. Another book from this author that I love is A Love Song for Ricky Wilde. So this one's a little bit more like historical fiction with magical realism in it. So if you love all of that, highly recommend this one. I think 7 Days in June I loved more, but this one is really solid as well. So in this one, the heroine's part of this like prominent Atlanta family, and I think her family owns like funeral businesses, and she's like, yeah, I'm more artistic. I want to get out of that. So she decides to take off to New York and open up, I think she wants to open up like a flower shop. And so she is up there kind of doing that. So she starts to kind of just build her life there, and it's very much like kind of those everyday moments. But then she starts to realize that this man is watching her, and so she starts to kind of get to know him. There's reasons he's watching her, very much like that fated soulmates kind of vibe to the story. I really enjoyed this one as well. Kind of Harlem Renaissance as well. Really enjoyed. Next up is the author Christina C. Jones. So the first one is the first book in her Wright Brothers series. This whole series, I think there's 3 books plus a novella. It follows these brothers. I loved the entire series. This one in particular though is so good. So in this one, the heroine, she kind of helps out with her mom's college class, where the heroine will kind of read over her mom's students' school papers. So there's this one student of her mom's class that she really connects with, the person who's writing all of these essays. And so she's kind of connected with him without knowing him. So then one day she ends up bumping in physically, like literally in person, to the person whose stories that she's been reading, and they don't realize who one another is at first. And so they don't get off to a great start, which this one, I feel like the relationship was very much low drama, which I feel like is fine sometimes. I don't always need the high stakes, high energy, high drama. So I did really appreciate that about their relationship. It was just so fun to see it play out and see their chemistry. The hero is a former Army veteran, and so he has some things going on with his life as well that get revealed in the story, and I just loved this one. The whole series, highly recommend. Another series from this author is the Inevitable series. I love this series so much. The first book, Inevitable Conclusions, is one of my favorites. So in here, the hero and the heroine have been a part of one another's lives for 20 years. So they have a lot of connections, and they've been friends for years. They've been a little bit more sometimes, kind of friends with benefits situation. And so it kind of goes from there with their story, and you realize that these two are meant to be in one another's lives. So you kind of get to see that explored with them, of how the timing was never quite right. The lines have always been blurred between them. The heroine as well, she has like I think her daughter's like in her 20s, so she has an older daughter who the hero has been a part of her daughter's life as well. And I just love the history and connection these two have, and just that like friends to lovers, where it was always maybe not the right moment, but maybe now is the right time. I loved it so much. Highly recommend this entire series, but I did love this one in particular. Oh, and if you want an emotional one from Christina C. Jones, we have the culmination of everything. Just know that this has some really heavy content warning in it, and here the heroine is a successful trauma surgeon, and she has recently lost her husband and daughter, so she's dealing with a lot of grief and loss, and so she's kind of told to maybe get away and take a break for a little bit, and so she ends up going away to this small town. On her first day there, she's going on a hike, and she ends up falling and has to get rescued by the hero, and so he is a grumpy forest ranger, and he is going through his own kind of grief and loss as well. So like I said, heavy content warning for all of that going on in the story. And I just loved seeing their connection and how grumpy he is, but they both are going through things. Such a good one. Really enjoyed. This is another special edition from, I think, Hello Lovely that they did a few years back for this author. author. Next is Farrah Rochon. So this is The Dating Playbook. This is my favorite from this author. This author writes kind of more contemporary sports romances, at least the ones I've picked up. And so this is one of my favorites in her, I think it's the Boyfriend Project series. This whole series is following this group of women who become friends after they realize they were all dating the same person. And so they decide, you know what, forget that guy. We're going to take it out on him, but all of us are going to become friends because we were innocent in all of this. And so this whole series follows each of the women kind of getting their own story. So the heroine here is a former NFL player who wants to get back into the game. And the heroine here is a personal trainer who is in a lot of debt. And so she needs to take on some clients quickly. And so they start to work one another and it goes from there. So if you want like a fun sports romance, this one highly recommend. Next up is Christina Forest. So this is The Neighbor Favor. This is my favorite in her Green Sisters series. There's currently 3 books out. Her 3rd book just recently released in February. This is one of my favorite books of 2023. This one I love so much, especially if you like books set kind of in the book publishing world. So in here, the heroine is shy. She's a bit introverted. She works in the nonfiction division, but she's always kind of dreamed of wanting to work in the children's book world. She wants to be an editor for children's books. And so that's kind of been her dream. And so one day she's kind of just living life and she decides to write to one of her favorite authors. She emails him through his like website and asks about like his upcoming books, what's happening. I think he writes fantasy. And so she wants to know more about him. And so they start to communicate back and forth and start to have this like flourishing friendship and kind of connection. A little bit of a relationship situation is starting to unfold between them, which eventually they agree to meet up in person. He ghosts her. It's months later and the heroine is in this new apartment building and she runs into her new neighbor, which is the hero. And so it kind of goes from there of their relationship, of how they might already know one another. It goes from there. I love all the like bookish industry world in here. Highly recommend. I love this one. 2 pieces. So good. Very much like low angst, low stakes, but it's just so good. Next is Talia Hibbert. So this is Act Your Age, Eve Brown. It's the last book in the Brown Sisters series and I love this one to pieces. Just the quirkiness of Eve and seeing her pairing with the hero in this one is just everything I ever wanted and more. So in this one, Eve is a hot mess. You've kind of seen her featured throughout the series as well as you get, you know, her backstory in this book as well. So everything's been kind of going wrong, ton of failures in her life. And so her family basically tells her, you know what, you need to get your life figured out and grow up, act your age, hence the title of the book. And so she ends up taking off and going to this B&B, which the hero owns. So she sees a job opening for a chef position at the B&B. And so she decides, you know what, I need to get hired for that. Things go terribly wrong because that's just kind of the chaos that Eve brings to situations. And she ends up accidentally hitting the hero, the owner of the B&B. She hits him with her car. He gets a broken arm. So he's like, you know what? Now I actually kind of need some help with the B&B. I just love this one. It has so much fun with it. The hero is kind of that perfect mix of grumpy but swoony. He wants things to go his way. And Eve is like the total opposite of everything that he kind of wants life to be. I love their pairing. 2 pieces. Highly recommend the whole Brown Sister series, but this book, Act Your Age, Eve Brown in particular, is my absolute favorite. If you want a YA romance from this author, Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute is so good. I kind of went into this one not expecting too much because YA books, you know, I kind of don't always connect with them, but this one, so good. Highly recommend it. We have bisexual rep in here and I just loved the characters in here and kind of seeing that slice of life, coming of age moments. It's so much fun. Another fun one that I love from this author is Mating the Huntress, which is a werewolf wolf shifter kind of centered around Halloween time, but it is just so good and everything I love in werewolf wolf shifter romances. Highly recommend that one as well. This author has a massive backlist. I know she has a ton more, so those are just some of my favorites from her. For Stormy by J.L. Seegars, this is a special edition that I think Dark and Quirky did a couple years ago. I had to have it because this was one of my favorite reads of 2022. So in here, the heroine, she's been a widow for 4 years and she's definitely been on an emotional journey with that. And so in here, we see that the hero is actually, he's been in her life because he is her late husband's best friend who she kind of never got along with or always assumed he didn't like her. And so now the heroine is kind of needing his help for a business situation, or kind of on, I think, like the same construction project. I want to say he owns a construction company and she is maybe like an interior designer. So I think they have to come together on a project. And so they have to work around one another and kind of confront some of the maybe issues or feelings they have towards one another. It is so good. The emotional elements to this book, I loved this book. 2 pieces. I need to continue on because I think this author has some other books that connect to this one, like from friends and things like that, like friends groups. So I need to continue on, but this one, so good, but definitely content warning for the grief and the loss and kind of all of those things. So just know that going in. Another one I love from this author is a novella. So this is Again, and this is a second chance novella. So in here, the heroine is a wedding photographer and she is kind of going to this destination wedding in Mexico to be the maid of honor for her sister's wedding. And when she gets there, the best man is actually the groom's brother, which also happens to be the heroine's ex ex-husband. So definitely some complicated, conflicted feelings, which we kind of get to see explored in here. This one in particular does have heavy content warning as well, as it deals with infertility, IVF, and depression, and some other things as well. So definitely know that before going in, but such a good novella. I love the emotional elements this author brings to her books, and it's just reminding me that I need to go read more of hers right now. All right, another author that I absolutely love is Kennedy Ryan. I have read, I think, all of her books except for her very first maybe series that I need to go back to and read, because I think they've recently been republished with new covers. But Kennedy Ryan, I love all of her books to pieces, so here are just some of my favorites, so let's get into them. First up is Before I Let Go. This was my favorite book of, I think, 2022. I love this book so much. Such an emotional one. I feel like Kennedy Ryan in particular, all of her books kind of come with content warnings. They are more heavy on the emotional elements and kind of things like that, so just know that going in, some heavier content warning in a lot of hers. This book in particular is a second chance romance, which is one of my favorite tropes, and this book is between a divorced couple where they kind of still run a business together. They own a restaurant together, and it is just kind of the exploration of their lives and what they meant to one another, what they could still mean to each other. Love this one. You see how their life is still blended. They have children together. They have a business together. I love this book. There's so much to overcome between this couple, and just, their journey is so good, and I love it to pieces. So yeah, Before I Let Go, this is the current series the author is writing in, so highly recommend this one if you haven't read it yet. All right, another one that I love from Kennedy Ryan is All the King's Men. So this is a duology, and so this is the first book in it, The Kingmaker. The second book is The Rebel King. I love this duology so much. This book does leave off on a cliffhanger, so you're definitely going to want to jump right into the second book, and this book is just kind of that epic romance where it exists over many years. You see this couple's relationship and where they are at different times in their lives, just that very much like epic soulmate level where they really have to work though for their HEA as well. I love seeing all the things they overcome. It definitely has like a political kind of intrigue and moments with it as well. Highly recommend. It's just so good. Then we have the Hoop series. These are just 2 in the series. There are 3 full books, and then there's a bunch of novellas in the series as well. Love them all to pieces. These are just 2 of my favorites in the series. Highly recommend this series, but definitely know there's some heavy trigger warnings in this series. Long Shot is one of my favorites. It's the first in the series. And in here we see the heroine in an abusive relationship, and she is kind of stuck in this marriage, and you kind of see her stuck in this relationship at the same time of her knowing the hero for many years and him really wanting to help her and be there for her, but he's kind of stuck as well. And so you see their journey. Heavy content warning, like I said, so definitely know that before going in, but such an emotional book. Like there's certain keywords in this book that I still think about years later now. Highly recommend the Hoop series. They all center around basketball. Highly recommend. They're just so good. Very emotional though, so know that going in. Then we have Real by Kennedy Ryan. I'm just always obsessed with this original cover that she did. I know it's been recently picked up. A bunch of her books have been republished with a publisher, but I just love the indie covers so much. This book is amazing. It has like a chronic illness rep as well. And here the heroine is a Broadway star and the hero is a film director. And so they kind of want to work with one another, but they also are pulled to one another, have feelings for each other that they have to kind of work through as they work together. Such a beautiful book. I feel like Kennedy's books in general, they're always like emotional and beautiful and just like captivating. Just all of her books are so good. She is like a next level writer, I feel like. So masterclass writer. Love her books to pieces. So Queen Move is the last one I'll talk about from Kennedy Ryan that I love. This one, the hero and the heroine have been in one another's lives for practically their entire lives. Their families are very ingrained in each other's lives. So you see this very much childhood friends to lovers where they very much feel like they are one another's person, but some other things, some other people maybe get in the way of that. And so, just love this one. It's so good. Definitely all of her books have that just like soul level fated mates kind of quality to her characters where you know they're meant to be together. Highly recommend. Just love her books to pieces. Another author I really enjoy is Rilzy Adams. She has some amazing novellas. This is one of my favorites though. So this is Go Deep. So like you can see, it's a very short novella. This one is just the epitome of a friends to lovers novella, a good time. And here the heroine is an erotica writer and she is kind of in a rut. She doesn't know what to write. She's not inspired. So she decides to ask her best friend, the hero, to help her out and maybe inspire her with some scenes and some ideas. And so it kind of goes from there. So good. Love this one to pieces. Just one of my favorites from this author. So yeah, highly recommend Go Deep. Rilzy Adams just has amazing novellas. This is one of my favorites though. Next up is Rebecca Weatherspoon. So she has Rafe, which I really love and enjoy. And here the hero is actually the nanny to a single mom. The heroine is a doctor. She has, I think they're twins, but could be just possibly daughters, 2 daughters. And the hero is hired to be their nanny. Love this one. The communication in that book and this book that this author just brings to her relationships, I feel like they're just so healthy and like more mature, like having communication instead of having like third act conflicts of miscommunication. I love that about her books. So the second book, which is my favorite, is Zinni. This is a marriage of convenience where the heroine in here, her aunt ends up passing away at the beginning of the story, and the hero, he is kind of this like burly plus size Scotsman, and he was also really good friends with her aunt, and so they both inherit something from her aunt, where it's basically like they have to enter into this marriage of convenience to gain said inheritance, and so it kind of goes from there. I love in here how both Zinni and the hero are just very open with their communication. They tell each other what they're feeling, what they want, what they need. It is so good. Definitely on the shorter side, but ugh, such a fun time. Like if you want a fun time, this book is it. Next up is one of my historical romance queens, which is Beverly Jenkins. So I have read all of her historical romance. Here's just a snippet of some of my favorites from her. First up is Night Song. Had to showcase this gorgeous, stunning cover. They don't make covers like this anymore, and I wish they would. This was Beverly Jenkins' first published book as well. This book recently hit its 30th anniversary. Yes, last year. I know when I was at the Steamy Lit book signing that Beverly Jenkins was at, they were celebrating the 30th anniversary of Night Song being published. Love that so much for her. Her entire career is just so iconic. Love her historical romances. If you want a good mix of romance as well as history infused in those, definitely check out her books. They're just so good. I always learn so much from her books and love them to pieces. The heroine in here is a school teacher, and the hero in here is a soldier with, I believe, the Buffalo Soldiers, and it is their story. Like I said, I love Beverly Jenkins' historical romances. I have an entire author guide to her books on my channel where I've read all of her historical romances. I'll link it below because I go more in depth about all of the books there. I just love her books so much. I have reread some of her historical romances because they just mean so much to me. Just an iconic cover. It is absolutely stunning. I was thankful and lucky enough to find used copies of all of her books years ago now, so I'm so glad I have physical copies of them because they're absolutely stunning. But this is Indigo. This is such an iconic one from her. This book takes place in kind of pre-Civil War and has to do with kind of like the Underground Railroad, and so it kind of goes from there. I love this one to pieces. Was able to get all of my historical romances signed by Beverly Jenkins. I've been able to meet her 2 times at signings, and she is just everything and more. We must protect her at all costs. Indigo, highly recommend. Then there is Destiny Surrender. This is such an amazing one. This is part of her Destiny series, and in here the heroine is a woman of the night, we shall say, and so she ends up becoming pregnant with one of her clients' children, and so it kind of goes from there with her having to come into his life and need protection for reasons, and it is their romance and is so good. Billy is amazing. This was my first Beverly Jenkins read, so it always means just so much to me, but this one, so good. I highly recommend anybody who wants to pick up her books. Like, she has so many, pick up any, but definitely pick up this one. Such a good place to start, Destiny's Surrender. Then we have Through the Storm. So this is the first book in her Levesque family series, which is another one that I love. This is one of my favorites from her. Again, these covers, this one is just so good and I love it to pieces. Then 2 more from Beverly Jenkins. So we have Tempest and Wild Rain. These are actually from 2 different series, but they actually connect because the heroine in Wild Rain and the hero of Tempest are brother and sister. This one is a Western one, so this is part of her Old West trilogy, and it has a mail order bride situation. So good. Basically, the heroine shows up and she accidentally possibly shoots her future husband to be, and she kind of freaks him out for a little bit, but he is a widower and he's a single parent to his daughter. He needs a wife, and so he's very desperate to make it work. Kind of goes from there, and she definitely shakes up his life. Then in Wild Rain, we're following the sister of the hero of the previous book, and so in here, the heroine was kind of banished by her grandfather when she was 18, so she's very much been living off on her own in Wyoming and kind of having to take care of herself, take care of her own ranch, does her own thing. She's very independent, and so the hero shows up, and he's actually I think he's like a reporter, or he's trying to write a story about the heroine's brother, the hero of the previous book that I talked about. So he is in town and kind of starts to realize that maybe she is a little bit more interesting than the brother that he's supposed to be doing the story on. And so it kind of goes from there. Love this one. Love how strong and independent the heroine is. So good. Like, look at these gorgeous covers. I cannot. Definitely pick up Beverly Jenkins if you haven't yet. Next up is Naima Simone. So this is Sin and Ink. This is the first book in her Sweetest Taboo series. So the hero in here was a former MMA champion who now he owns a tattoo shop. And the heroine in this one is the hero's late brother's wife. So there's that forbidden element to it. And it is just everything and more. I loved this one. 2 pieces. Highly recommend. Another series I love from this author is the Lick series. So if you want more of like novella length, just like fun, spicy erotica times, this series series is definitely that. So the first book is Only for a Night, and I love this one. This one is angsty, steamy, second chance between childhood friends, and it is so good. Won't say too much else because, like I said, they're novella length, so they're very, very short. But this is the first one in the Lick series. Highly recommend. The next one is Business Casual by Danielle Allen. This one is a workplace romance, and it's more on the shorter side. I think it's like less than 300 pages. So this one starts off with the heroine going for an interview at a new job. So when she's in the lobby for the interview, she ends up kind of hitting it off with this man in the lobby. They have a lot of like flirty moments. They're totally feeling each other out, getting along. And so it's kind of going well. He asks her out on a date. They exchange numbers. He gives her his business card, and then they go upstairs and they realize that not only is he in the interview with her, he is the owner of the company. And so it has this kind of like, you know, forbidden workplace romance. So much fun. Really enjoyed this one. Next is Only for the Week by Natasha Bishop. If you want a very quick, like just only for the week kind of fling, hookup, summer vacation fling romance, this one is definitely that. So in this one, the heroine is at her sister's destination wedding in Mexico. And so in here, the groom that her sister's gonna marry is actually the heroine's ex. So she's already going through a lot of feelings and a lot of things that weekend. And so she ends up actually hooking up with the best man of the wedding, who is the hero. And so it's supposed to be just a only for the week while we're here type of situation. But of course it grows into more. I love and hear how the hero immediately is like, no, I want more from you right now. And it goes from there. Really enjoyed this one if you want kind of those like wedding shenanigans, family drama. This one has all of that. Next up is Adriana Herrera. So this is her Las Leonas series. This author has a ton of books. She has a ton of historical romances. She has novellas. She has contemporary books. I've read a bunch of hers, but the series in particular I love and want to talk about today. This series has recently gotten new covers, so there's more of this like illustrated design, but it keeps to kind of the original colors for the original series. So this is a Caribbean heiress in Paris, and this is the first book in the series. So in this one, the heroine has left Santo Domingo and she is traveling to Paris with her two best friends and hundreds of casks of rum. And so basically she needs to get a business deal for her family's business that's been around for generations. And so she has come to Paris to kind of work out a business deal situation. And there she ends up meeting the hero, who is actually a Scotsman, and it kind of goes from there. This is the first book in the series, like I said. The second book, this one I still have the original cover for. So this is An Island Princess Starts a Scandal. And this one is so good. The series only got better for me. So this is book 2. And so this one is a sapphic romance where the heroine in here, she basically is like, okay, I know I have to go back and get betrothed and be in this marriage situation that I don't want. So let me have this like one last moment of fun in Paris. And so she ends up meeting the other heroine, who is a duchess, and it kind of goes from there. I love this one to pieces. The Parisian scene, the art scene, these all take place in, I want to say like 1880s, 1890s. Highly recommend. Love this one to pieces. And then book 3, which recently just came out in February, is A Tropical Rebel Gets the Duke. Came with this gorgeous art print because I pre-ordered this one from a bookshop that the author was signing at. This book is so good. Like I said, the series only got better for me, so I love book 2 and book 3 the most. This book in particular is so good, but definitely has some heavier content warnings. The heroine in here is a physician in Paris in the 1880s, and she is running these underground abortion clinics, so definitely some heavier content warning that comes with that. And the hero in here, he is a black duke, and so he is kind of dealing with a lot of political things going on at the time for himself as well, and trying to find his place. And he's very connected to the heroine and wants her and wants to protect her. She is very much though independent, used to taking care of herself, doesn't want to really rely on anyone, especially a man. And so it kind of goes from there with him kind of quietly trying to look after and care for her. Love their connection, how much they fight it, but are so perfect for one another. Really enjoyed this one as well. All right, next up is QB Tyler. So here are just some of my favorites from her. If you want taboo, steamy, forbidden, her books are definitely that, usually age gap involved as well. This is a special edition that Dark and Quirky did for this book. I actually only own special editions for this author's books, I realized. So anyways, this is a special edition that they did for her book a few years back. So this one's very taboo. It involves a stepfather and a stepdaughter, kind of goes from there. Like I said, if you just want high steam and forbidden elements, this author definitely delivers. Another one that I love from her is Keep Her Safe. So this is another gorgeous special edition. I think cover to cover, possibly did this one a couple years ago as well. I love the gold elements to it. So this one is a Hollywood starlet and a bodyguard romance. So this one has forbidden, but it's like maybe less forbidden than the previous one. Then the last one is What Was Meant to Be. This is a special edition that Hell Lovely did last year, and I love it so much. This is my favorite QB Tyler book. So in this one, the hero and heroine have been in one another's lives for years. He is her parents' best friend, and so very much those forbidden kind of age gap situations as well. They were something in the past and nobody knew about it. It was kind of a secret relationship, and now it is years later, and it kind of goes from there. I love this one. This is my favorite from her. So angsty and emotional and just, it's just so good. I love this couple to pieces. All right, and then lastly is another author that I absolutely love, one of my all-time favorites is Britney C. If you want emotional damage from books that are just so beautiful at the same time, then definitely pick up her books. I especially love her older books, but let's jump into these. This is Eleanor and Gray. I love this one at 2 pieces. So in this book, the hero and the heroine kind of knew one another as teenagers, which you get to see that explored in the first bit of the story. And you see this connection that they have and just all this angst involved around that and how perfectly they fit together. And then some things kind of get in the way. Life gets in the way. They get torn apart. It's years later, and now the heroine is kind of trying out for this new job. She wants to be a nanny, and so she ends up going to the interview, and it's the hero, and it's for his children that he had with his late wife. And so he is a totally different changed man and different than the boy that she knew all those years ago in high school. And so she kind of wants to bring joy and light and life back into his life, into his daughter's lives, and it kind of goes from there. A hard one to read emotionally, but just such a good book. Second Chance. It's so beautiful. I love this one to pieces. Love her connection with the hero, and then of course with his daughters as well. So good. And then the next ones to recommend are her Elements series. These 3 in particular are my favorites. So we have The Gravity of Us, Silent Waters, and The Air He Breathes. There are 4 books in the series, but these 3 I love so much. Such emotional damage, but they're so good and they're all different, and I love them to pieces. Highly recommend. If you want books that'll make you cry, the Elements series is definitely that. All right, so those are all of the books that I have to recommend today. Definitely let me know in the comments if you've read any of these authors, if you're going to pick up any of these books I talked about today. If you have any romance books by Black authors or books that you want to recommend me, definitely let me know that as well. And if you'd rather leave me an emoji in the video today, let me know that you watched it. Leave me a purple heart because the Tropical Rebel Gets a Duke is purple. So let's go with a purple heart below. And if you haven't done so yet, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. And I'll see you in my next one. Bye!